Welcome to the TCS WMN Podcast, where the ladies of the top contractor school are going to get together to discuss what it's like to be a woman in construction, leadership, and navigating the balance between it all. Your host for the TCS WMN Podcast will be Carla Goldammer, who has been in construction for almost 30 years with D&J Site Construction. She will be accompanied by a rotation of co-hosts that include Elizabeth Reinman of RK Reinman Construction, Sandra Albert of Bay Country Contractors, Lillian Calloway of K&L Industries, and Kelsey Wright of Pro Line Parking Lot Maintenance. Let's get started.
Welcome back to TCS WMN's podcast, where we shine a light on the bold, brilliant women shaping the construction industry and beyond. Today's guest is Lauren Furtado, a fractional CFO, a powerful leader, a devoted mom, and a woman who's walked through unimaginable loss with courage and grace. Lauren is not only helping companies understand their numbers, she's helping women understand their worth. In this episode, we're going to go beyond business. We're going to talk about grief. We're going to talk about strength, single motherhood, and what it's like to live and lead in a space where your voice isn't always expected, but is deeply needed. This one's raw, it's real, and it's full of heart. Let's dive in. Lauren, thank you for being a willing participant today and wanting to share your story. I know that we had you on a TCS WMN All Call. So for those of you that missed that call, shame on you because it was amazing. But I wanted to bring you on here today just to share your voice, introduce you to the TCS community. I know you're kind of newer to the community, and this is just kind of a way for us women and the community to kind of get to know you better. So welcome to the podcast.
I appreciate your having me. It's an honor to be here.
Awesome. So we're going to roll back. We're going to start, who's Lauren? Where did she come from? And kind of get to start from the backstory to where we are today. So I just wanted to, tell our audience that you did lose your husband several years ago, and that was a kind of a dark place. But I wanted to start there. What did that season look like for you, and how did you get through having such a loss unexpectedly, and how that pivoted and changed your story?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll rewind back to the loss happened in 2021 in June. So we're coming up on the 4-year mark. At the time, my children were 2 and 5, so 2 young kiddos. I was working full-time at a public accounting firm, which I had been with for, at that point, 15 years. Was working my way up the ladder, working full-time. My husband was an electrician. He was a union guy in New York. So he was working big bully jobs in Manhattan, hanging off, big high-rise buildings or bridges. And our world completely changed in one phone call. That morning he went to work and we never saw him again. It was an event that completely changed the trajectory of our family and my life. As you can imagine, I am then grieving the loss of my spouse. I am now parenting children who are grieving the loss of their father, which came with complexities all on its own. And I will tell you, they continue to this day. My children, as they get older, grieve continually over the years. They're going to continue to grieve. They're going to continue to grieve their own specific ways. So it was really being able to answer those questions, relieve some of those anxieties as children. As you can imagine, when one parent just never comes home, when you're expecting to see them, that you have worries about everybody else, right, Mom? Like, how do we know you're going to be safe? So it was a lot of demands on parenting that didn't exist, in the hours even prior to that phone call. Also losing not only the income, right, of being a household that ran on 2 pretty decent incomes that were fairly similar. So that element got added in, but also when you lose your partner, you lose the plans that you have, right? When you are building your life with someone else and making all the decisions of what house do we buy? How do we parent? What are we having for dinner tonight? Like, all of that now fell on me. So every single decision, every plan was completely blown up. And in the wake of early loss, as you can imagine, I was just in it almost felt like an out of body experience. I always call it like the fog of early grief. Even though I physically was going through the motions, it's interesting because I think your brain just has a way of protecting you. There's certain things I just don't even remember that, like, how did I get through the funeral? How did I get through the services? And I know now what the answer to that is, but at the time, right, it was a bit of being on autopilot.
Mm.
I will say, just from a professional perspective, working for the big firm that I was with, I am super grateful. It was a time where I felt like the loyalty and the hours I had done over the years truly were being rewarded. And I say that in the context of, at the time, the policy for bereavement, I want to say, was like 3 days. And with that
Mm.
said, the partners I worked for at the time gave me 2 months fully paid. I took vacation time and things like that as well. But like, I didn't have to think about that piece of my life, that I truly was able to take the time I needed to settle into what our new life looked like and be able to tend to my grief. The last thing you want to do is distract from that and not deal with trauma like that. Thankfully, I had a therapist before that, so I just continued that journey. That was a big component for me. But I will say, my faith was one of the biggest takeaways from my grief. 2.5 years ago, I had an encounter with Jesus, and truly, I can now look back on those early days of grief and know that He was lighting my path, that I was just taking the steps, that He was there every step of the way, leading me to continue to show up for my children every day. As you can imagine, the ages they were, I still had to get up every day and make sure they were fed and bathed and they got to school. So, like, I didn't do that alone. And I know that now, that the Lord truly was with me walking those days, and He still continues to.
Amen. Amen. So I'll share a little bit with our viewers and with you the grief journey for myself. So I'm adopted, and I found my birth mom about 6 years ago. And I kind of came in more towards the end of her life. And I did end up losing her. And for me, that was the first time that I had truly like started a grief journey. It rocked my world because there was this sense of like, I didn't have enough time with her. But then also like being grateful for the time that I did have. And it changed me. It truly like, yes, I had lost grandparents, and yes, like I'd lost like other people that were close to me. But this, for whatever reason, this grief journey actually taught me about grief and like what that looked like. And
Yeah.
then just like a year and 4 months ago, I also lost my sister. That was tragic and unexpected. And I felt like I was trying to compensate for the one grief journey and take on a new grief journey. And I kind of described it like a backpack, right? Like that you're going through life and you have your grief backpack on and you forget about it sometimes, right? Like you're going through life and then like a sound, a song, a smell, something happens. And then you're like, oh my God, my grief backpack is so heavy. And like you forget about it, right? But like you're still carrying it through life. And I remember the time that like with my birth mom, I knew that I had finally taken that grief journey backpack off. Like it wasn't heavy anymore. Like, yes, I still missed her. And yes, like I still like yearn to be with her, but like I took the backpack off. I don't know when it came off, but like I was happy that like it didn't feel so heavy anymore. So I think part of life is learning to deal with grief, right? We're taught so many things in school, but nobody actually talks about grief. Like, how do we prepare for it? How do we deal with it? And obviously, as you know, everyone, deals with it, differently. And us as women, we're super emotional. Like people, I will tell you, and I'm sure you can back the statement up that like people said some of the craziest, inappropriate things to me. And I remember being like, wow. The next time that I respond to someone in grief, it's 100% not going to be a statement like that. So like
Yeah.
through your journey, like how have you like handled that? Like how do you task what you're doing each day by wearing your grief backpack, and like where are you in that journey?
Yeah, it's interesting because when you talked about, you know, when you put it back on or even realize it's there again, sometimes after one little trigger, it's after the first year, you almost forget the level of physical exhaustion that comes with grief. That, like in the early days, the toll it actually has on your body is so heavy. People don't realize how physically, mentally draining, like the emotional part can be. And in days where it does come, it's such a realization of like, oh my God, like when we have a heavy grief day, how did I even survive that? It's a reflection of a little bit of, wow, I actually am way more resilient than I could have imagined because this feels so heavy today. And I just can't even fathom how I handled it at the beginning for such an extended period of time because it takes you out even now, right? When there is a trigger and you put that back on. And especially for the kids, I think for them as they get older, and my daughter, quite honestly, the last couple of weeks has been very griefy. She's 5.
Mm.
She's graduating kindergarten and she feels angry. She feels like it's unfair. She sees the other little girls with their dads, right? And it's being able to now I'm reliving the same questions that I did with my son in the early days. But I think going about it, like you said about like one grief journey to the other, I feel way more equipped to
Mhm.
talk about it with her. And when you have young kids, there's no question that's off limits for them of like even just understanding how bodies stop working and how is he in heaven if his body got cremated, but like just all of these very like simple questions about death because this is their first experience with it. But having sat in the seat of, you talked about grandparents dying, it's different when you're in the front seat of
Mhm.
the funeral home, right? And you're the first person in the first seat. It is different when you're in the front row. And it's a level of grief that when you find people who have been through it, there's a bit of kindred spirits, right? Because you're not the person who's going to say the wrong thing. But candidly, before that, I could have been the person to say the wrong things. I think I'm very unapologetic when it comes to my grief, and it makes people uncomfortable, and I'm totally fine with that. And I say that in a bit of humor because when people get more uncomfortable talking about it than I do. Listen, I have lived this for 4 years. And when you have young children literally ask me about physical bodies and burials and all the things, like I've talked about it ad nauseum. And so for me, I don't get uncomfortable when one of my daughter's little friends might ask about it, right? Parents cringe. It is funny to me to watch because they're so uncomfortable, like you said earlier, about not teaching people how to grieve. We also don't promote talking and processing it like within the community enough, right? It's like, okay, well, you should be fine, right? And even within my close group of girlfriends, it was like, well, the first year goes by, not for nothing, they're probably sick of hearing about it too, right? If this is consuming my everyday, like I have to find the space in the community in order to handle my grief. And it's not necessarily in the same circles that I may have ran before.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like people give grief a timestamp, like,
Mhm.
okay, you've reached the year and good for you. Like,
It is fine, right?
yeah, grief doesn't have a timestamp. It shows up like a nasty pimple, right? Like when you're like, oh, everything's fine, I'm good, I'm good. And then all of a sudden, like Mount Everest is on your cheek, and you're like, where did that even come from? So I think
And I
that's
think
part of,
it's
go ahead.
good. I was going to say, I think it's just acknowledging the coexistence of multiple things at the same time, right? Like as human beings, we're not just one thing or the other, right? Like when people look at me from the outside looking, wow, you're so strong. The kids seem so happy. Okay, yeah, but at 4:30 in the morning when one of my kids is up in the middle of the night crying for their father, like you didn't see that piece, right? So like just acknowledgement that like joy and grief can coexist in the same space and that like I continually tell my children that guys, I know it's hard some days and I know it feels really unfair, but we have so much to be thankful for. And like, God is still good and we have such a beautiful life still left to lead, that like, it's just being able to acknowledge that. Not everybody sees it, right? They just think, okay, you've stuffed it away, everything's fine, you hit the year mark and now you're great, right? Like, well, okay, now when are you getting remarried? That's the next question. So it's just they get so uncomfortable with your grief. They want to see you be okay. They want to see you moving on so they don't have to acknowledge it any longer, because seeing, especially if it's someone close to you that doesn't like to see you in pain, right?
Yeah.
They want you to be okay. They don't want to see you crying and struggling, and because they don't know what to do.
Absolutely. That's something that you brought up is like, I'm talking about my own grief backpack, but when you have children, you're helping them carry their grief backpack too. So
Yeah. And I'll say, as much as it is so painful to watch my children grieving the loss of their father in those hard moments, to see their faith get enhanced by the situation as well, to see their reliance, to hear them praying to God when they need it, has been such a blessing, that my kids have coping mechanisms that people don't get until much later in life. I didn't find till I was in my 40s. That like,
uh,
not for nothing, guys, like you were blessed with the ability to be close to God in a way early in your life, because unfortunately, like all of us are going to die. We're all going to lose people we love, which makes it even more ironic, right? That in culture, we don't talk about grief enough. Like
right.
everybody is going to lose every person you care about. I'm sorry to tell you that, but it's true.
Yeah. Yeah. They don't prepare us for that in any kind of way. They don't
No.
prepare us for what it's going to look like for caring for a parent at end of life, losing someone, through hospice and through cancer. Like, I'll tell you that when we brought my sister home with hospice, my nephew had come home from college and he thought he was coming home for the weekend. Like, he didn't understand. We throw the word hospice out there and everybody think like everyone knows what that means, and he pulled me to the side and he was like, we had talked about building a ramp to help my sister get in and out of the house. And he was like, Aunt Sandy, like, when are you going to build the ramp for mom? And I was like, um, so do you understand what hospice means? And he was like, I mean, they're going to take care of her at home. And I was like, yeah, family meeting. No, we're actually not going to build the ramp because your mom is actually not going to walk out of this house. And, so just like assuming that people know and just going into that place again, you're not prepared for it. And I feel like it's when you go through a journey like you have and what I have, like it's almost like our duty to have to like educate people to say, hey, like you need to prepare your children for this. Like whether they're small or whether, they're adult children who are coming home from college thinking like they're going to go home this weekend, and mom's okay. Like she's going to be fine. I mean, it was very shocking, but again, eye-opening of, what we are or not preparing, our children for.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely balance, right? Of you don't want to instill fear, because like even with my kids, a lot of both of them have said it. Like we're afraid you're going to die. Any time I joke around and say you're old, mom, they're both like you're not old. I'm like okay, relax, I'm not going anywhere. But I tell them, listen, I try to take care of myself. That's why I eat well. That's why we move our bodies, right? Like it's why I go to the doctor. So I'm not planning on going anywhere. But guess what, guys? There is going to be a day at some point, I said, but you have a lot of family that loves and cares about you. And again, like you've got to go to God.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's move into like how you transitioned, obviously, from having two parents in the household helping with school and bath time and dinner to now being single parent. How do you balance that? How do you run a household, run a business, run your personal life? Like, what does that look like for you?
So once I finally did go back to work, a couple changes happened, and I'm super thankful. So at that time, I still was with the accounting firm. At that point, I just am so thankful for one of the partners. Her name was Jeanette that I worked for. And she said, Lauren, like, let's talk about what it really looks like when you come back. Do you want to work full time? And if you don't, then what can you afford to do? And one of the tools I actually use with clients, I implemented for my personal life. I did a cash flow forecast and I said, okay, based on the expenses, based on the income that I'm bringing in, like what can I afford to do here? So I went on an 85% schedule. So I worked from 8 to 3 every day. I picked the kids up every single day from school. I am at every practice. I am at every baseball game. I am at everything. So for me, the priority, hands down, without a doubt, will always be what goes on at home. And for me, being in that job, I was still being compensated well. I worked from home, so I could throw the laundry in, right? I could manage some of the stuff during the day. I had the groceries delivered while I'm in meetings, right? So I think I try to take whatever liberties I can. Listen, I have cleaning ladies. Yes, because I'm not going to clean my house. I need to do it. So I take liberties where I can afford to do that and get help. But I show up as the parent that I truly want to be. I show up not my kids getting picked up last from aftercare, right? I'm at the blacktop. I see the teacher. I see the other kids. I hear how their day is. And for me, that was very different than how I was parenting before. When my husband was alive, I was working till at least 6 o'clock every day. I was exhausted, doing the nighttime routine. And I'll say I feel so much better in terms of my allocation of my time on my professional life versus my personal life, because I only got one shot. They're only little ones. They're only whatever age ones, right? That like, I truly don't want to miss these moments. But I really got to a point with the firm where I was craving impact way more. I was serving multi-billion-dollar corporations, and I just felt like it was a bit soulless, to be honest. Here I was, I'm a CPA, I have 20 years experience, and I'm just feeding these huge companies. Like, how can I take this skill set and now translate that into something that feels way more meaningful? And so for me, this fractional CFO space was such a natural fit from a client service perspective. And I love the ability to build my business around my life, not the other way around. That at the end of the day, my calendar is blocked for the time I am with the kids. And like, that's it. I will have meetings when I need to. I am very efficient with my time in both, I'll say, because the last thing I want to do is be halfway present on a podcast recording with you, Sandra, and I've got kids downstairs, right? Or the last thing I want to do is be eating dinner with them and answering emails, right? So for me, it's about truly being present in whichever thing I'm doing and being able to execute. Plans blow up, that's for sure. The school nurse actually called me on Friday when I was recording a podcast with Eric, and I was like, you got to wait. So things come up, right? But I think it's about understanding, like, you can at least attempt to build it in a way that still feels pretty good. And I think too, with the faith, like surrendering control, like has been such a big piece of my faith journey the last couple of years of like, I can do all the things and it's still not going to look perfect. And that's okay. It doesn't mean I'm a bad parent. It doesn't mean I'm a bad business owner. So I think it's just being able to bring in the element of grace within my business and my personal life, and just be satisfied that every day, hopefully I'm stewarding both well.
Wow, Lauren, you're amazing. So I'm going to ask you one last question. What's one thing that motherhood has taught you about leadership, or vice versa?
Patience, probably number one, and I'm still working on it. And I think of my daughter, as I say that. She is a handful, but she is so funny and she's so smart. But I think it's just, you're not going to have immediate results for everything. It's being patient and being diligent and letting her grow in her way, because I know that's the best thing for her, instead of, again, trying to just enforce obedience. So letting her flourish. And I think it's the same with employees sometimes, not to micromanage, to let people find their way a bit. For me, I coach a lot on my team of come to me with answers, not questions, right? So it's not jumping in too early in the pain. It's work through it a little bit and come to me when you're ready with a proposed solution. So I think that translates really in both worlds.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you coming on to the podcast today. I am super excited to have our part 2. So anyone that's listening to this podcast, stay tuned for part 2 because we're going to super dive into Lauren and her role as a fractional CFO. So thank you so much for joining us today, Lauren, and sharing a part of your journey. I do hope that we can reach and impact women out here, and that your journey, while there are some really sad parts to it, there's also amazing parts, and what God has done for you and blessed you. We're so honored to have you here, and be a part of our group. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Welcome to the TCS WMN Podcast, where the ladies of the top contractor school are going to get together to discuss what it's like to be a woman in construction, leadership, and navigating the balance between it all. Your host for the TCS WMN Podcast will be Carla Goldammer, who has been in construction for almost 30 years with D&J Site Construction. She will be accompanied by a rotation of co-hosts that include Elizabeth Reinman of RK Reinman Construction, Sandra Albert of Bay Country Contractors, Lillian Calloway of K&L Industries, and Kelsey Wright of Pro Line Parking Lot Maintenance. Let's get started.